everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics. Joining me today is the artist and co-writer of Isola at Image Comics. It's Karl Kerschl. Thanks for coming on, Karl.
Hey, David.
Hey, so, we're going to be talking about Isola today, which I love, and you've been talking about a lot because it just came out the week of this podcast. But I want to go somewhere else before we head that direction. I'm a big fan of your comics to the point where I'm pretty sure Brendan, your collaborator on this, Brendan Fletcher, is probably expecting me to totally fanboy out here, like go Chris Farley show on you totally. But I'm curious about like the way, like what the varying things were that inspired the way that you approach both art and story, and I want to start there. At Comics Pro,
that's a nice small question.
No, we have. I'm gonna tighten it up. In Portland at Comics Pro, we talked about the Image founders, and that's not something I typically would have expected to be a big thing for you. What was it about those comics and those creators that really spoke to you?
Oh, so much. I mean, my history with comics is sort of a weird, it took some weird meandering route to get where I eventually ended up. I have a recollection of reading comics when I was really young. And most of my comic reading was stuff that my mom would buy me when we were on long family trips. Like we'd go on these long car trips, and every time we stopped to get gas or something, we'd get a comic or two off a spinner rack, and I'd read those. And so I was really well versed in like characters and the lore and all that stuff. Not so much the creative teams until later, and then. But it wasn't really important to me. It was just like stuff that I enjoyed reading. I mean, I enjoyed Archie stuff as much as I enjoyed the superhero stuff.
Sure.
But then later I got back into comics collecting largely because Brendan introduced me to the fact that it was a thing, like that you could, that there were stores specifically for comics and that you could go there once a week. Like I never had that habit, nor did I know it was something that was even possible. Like I know if you read you read interviews with people or talk to other comic book creators, they're always, at least in my experience, even the people I hang out with, like we'd go for lunches with studio mates and stuff, and these guys are super immersed in the history of comics. I'm like they were very it's something they came to themselves. I think that's the big difference. Mm-hmm. Like they found it themselves. It filled some sort of void in their lives, and they became really attached to comics and everything about them. And I just sort of like kind of floated around it peripherally and came to it, a slightly different way. So I don't have that that kind of fanatical attachment to it and all of the the insane history of it, right, until high school when Brendan and I and some other friends were going to the comic store really regularly. I got heavily into Jim Lee's X-Men run, his Uncanny run.
Yeah.
Like early on in it, like shortly after what was it, like 248, I think, the one with Black Widow and Captain America
and Wolverine on the cover.
Yeah, just incredible. Like, I mean, I remember seeing that at a friend's house, and it just sort of, it was just, evidently life-changing. Like I just looked at that thing and was blown away.
I feel like that cover is like, there's just something different about it. It was like this like coming out party for Jim Lee, where as soon as you saw it, well, in my head, when I see that, it just like, it stands out so much from like everything everything else I was reading at the time. As soon as I saw that, I was like, this is something different.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So prior to that, I did have I was following certain creators before that. I went through a phase in the 80s, I guess, where I did latch on heavily to Frank Miller after Dark Knight Returns, and then Sienkiewicz when Elektra Assassin came out. And I have one of those car trips, I had like this beat up copy of Batman, was it 400? I think Batman 400. It has a Sienkiewicz cover on it. It had a bunch of different artists inside it. Art Adams was one of them. I can't remember who all the other ones were, but all this to say, I was aware, like I had a sense, like a keen sense of different art styles and who was responsible for what,
Hmm.
and I, my taste started to be shaped there. But um, it wasn't until that Jim Lee Uncanny run that I seriously, properly got into comics and thought, oh, I really want to do this. And I followed his stuff all through X-Men, and then because of that and because of the time, got interested in. I came to McFarlane after that. Like
Hmm.
most people, I think were following him on Amazing Spider-Man prior to Jim's run, but yeah, I came to McFarlane and then Larson after McFarlane left Amazing, and Portasio when he was helping Jim on X-Men stuff, and then later on X Factor. Um, and Liefeld, of course, on New Mutants and then X Force. Like I came to all that stuff because I was interested in Jim Lee's work and
Hmm.
Silvestri also. And so when Image was formed, it was just this perfect storm of all of the stuff that I had been into, kind of culminating in this movement. And I think it's as much that movement, that kind of um, disruptive, defiant streak that kind of um, enraptured me as much as the art itself. Like I was already into the art, but then as a collective, I was just super into all those guys. I liked them all independently, like very sincerely. Like I liked all of their work on its own. Um, but then when Image happened, I became super hooked and just enamored of the idea of it, of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so like since then it was always kind of a dream to be part of Image, but just in terms of influences and art, like I studied all that stuff. I studied all those guys because I was looking at their work all the time. Like the good and the bad parts of it. Like everyone has flaws,
Right.
obviously, but you learn as much from that stuff as you do from the things they do really well. I don't know if that answers your
No,
question. I'm
totally.
kind of trying to figure it out myself because now, like, if you look at that, it's such an eclectic mix.
Well, and I think it was very specifically that they did have that kind of mix that made it as successful as they were, both from a personality standpoint and from a creative standpoint. Because it's
Hmm.
like, I kind of like, I feel like there's been a resurgence of love and interest in Liefeld's work, in particular in the last few years, through people like Ed Piskor and like Brandon Graham and Simon Roy and et cetera, et cetera. And the reason why is like I think that like the energy of his art really spoke to people, and just the energy of his force of personality really helped Image become what it was initially. And it's like a lot of times people sleep on those abilities because of like some of the side stories that came from it, and how it played out in the 90s and everything. But it's still, I mean, it was a massive thing. And it was, I have to ask, like, was the fact that they were renegades and broke off and did their own thing, was that like inspiring to you as somebody who was interested in making comics, and did it kind of make you want to make your own comics, not necessarily just for Image?
It made me want to do my own thing, whether it was comics or whatever. Like I was a really quiet kid. I mean, I'm still a pretty quiet guy, but it wasn't until like I mean, I remember going through high school being very like I had a core group of friends and I wasn't really interested in social anything. Like I just hung out with my pals,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we would talk about stuff and make stuff. But it wasn't until I went to university um, to study art, which I eventually flunked out of, that I kind of realized I had this like. It wasn't until then that I spoke up.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say like I kind of realized I had sort of this anti-authoritarian streak in me. I don't know where exactly it comes from, but I remember going to school there and finally, just being really because I was already working toward making comics, and I knew what I wanted. I knew exactly what I wanted, and uh, I wanted training, like very specific training in the stuff that I was interested in, like the thing
Mm-hmm.
I was working toward. And at the time, in a visual arts degree, it was a fine arts degree basically. It was hard to get that kind of focused training because it's such a it's like the curriculum is so broad,
Right.
and also at the time like that would have been 90, I don't know, 93, 94 maybe almost. um like the comic art form was was kind of looked down upon,
Yeah.
especially by university teachers teaching fine arts. Um, so it wasn't until then that I recall talking back to professors, like just defending myself and defending
Your
my
passion.
chosen art form, my passion.
Yeah.
And I realized at the time that like I would do stuff. I began doing things at that point just to piss people off,
Yeah.
just to piss them off, just to show them that they weren't, that I had an opposing viewpoint and that they weren't necessarily right about certain things. And that's kind of like that streak has sort of followed me into my like the rest of my life and my career. And I probably make a lot of decisions that are not the best career decisions. Um, and I might like I don't know, like I have this is weird territory for me because I feel like I have well maybe certain regrets about just the way I've approached all this. I've never really because of the way I approached comics in general. I was never like 100% in it, if that
Hmm.
makes any sense. Like I kind of flirted with it a lot, and I was um, I always felt like, okay, well, this is a thing I can do. Like I'm okay at this. I can just kind of float in and out of it and come back to it as I like, as my interests wax and wane. And that is not the way to build a career. And now I'm 43 and probably could have had a way more illustrious career had I chosen to focus on that sort of thing and just did not. But I've gone like way off of the question.
No. It is interesting though because it's like I think the first time I became aware of your stuff was the Wednesday comic story you guys did, and I'm sure I'd like at that point I think I was kind of out of reading comics when you first kind of got into it. And like so, Wednesday Comics, I picked that up, and then I found Abominable Charles Christopher, and obviously I'm a super fan of that, Gotham Academy, etc. But it was like it is kind of interesting because it did seem like you would kind of come and go a little bit more than somebody I would expect with like all of your you're an incredible talent. Like I love your work and everything, and it was just kind of interesting. And I wasn't sure if that was like a choice thing so much as just that's just kind of how it worked out.
It wasn't a choice as much as just never being certain about what I wanted from this, and I think it says a lot that like I've been doing this since I think I got my first work when I was 19 or something. So it's been over 20 years of doing this, but for a long time, every time I would kind of come back and do work on a project that was slightly longer or slightly higher profile,
Mm-hmm.
I was billed as a hot newcomer
Right.
for years, for like 10, 12 years. So that that's kind of illustrates exactly what you said. Yeah, I would sort of come and go from it. And it wasn't, it's not like I would decide to not work for a while. It was I would work on a thing and then I'd get kind of tired of it after three issues and sort of flake out and someone would have to do a fill-in issue of it, which is how Scotty Young actually got work at Marvel. He filled in on an issue of an Iceman miniseries I was doing,
Yeah.
and and then I would just not work for like 6 months, and I'd get interested again and come back and get some other work, and then I don't know. It's like it's kind it's kind of embarrassing, but at the same time, I learned a ton from it,
Yeah.
and I'm much more disciplined now, and I think I have a much better idea of what it is I want to do.
Right.
The Charles Christopher thing is kind of it's sort of like my work on that is also sort of fueled by that independent streak,
Mm-hmm.
in that it was a thing that I did 100% by myself. Like I could have gotten a lot of help printing stuff or fulfilling things or getting books made, getting T-shirts made, but I felt like I just had to do everything. Partly because I didn't want to rely on anyone, and probably mostly because I just like learning stuff. Like I just like knowing how things work. And then the problem though is that once I've learned something and figure out how it works, I'm just not that interested anymore. and I have to move on to something else
I
to
also
learn.
kind of wonder if so I have both of the hardcover. Well, I don't think there's been a third Charles Christopher hardcover.
No, not
Um,
yet.
I have both of the hardcovers, and I honestly don't think those books could exist at a publisher and when you were publishing them. Like I don't think like if you went to like Image or Dark Horse, I don't think the way that you did that could almost. I don't even know if they would go for it because like the stock of it was so great and the covers like they kind of have, if I recall, I haven't touched them lately, but like a fuzziness to them, and
Hmm.
like that's such a unique thing, and I feel like that independent streak kind of helped the book be as good as it is, or the comic be as good as it is, both in a physical sense and in a creative sense.
I guess so. It's like I think of it as kind of like this weird, like, it's like integrity to a fault,
Sure.
because it's like it's a stupid business move. I mean, they're not. I made some money off of those books, but not as much as I suppose I could have if I didn't spend extra money putting like suede covers and things on it. But it's
Right.
just the vision I had for them, and I just wanted to do it, and I could do it. And you're probably right. I mean, I don't think another publisher would have allowed me to make a book that expensive. And also, I don't think that anyone else would have published a book of strips at that pace,
Yeah.
because at one strip per page, um, that's sort of, I think most people would have deemed it uh, not wasteful, but like just not efficient, and just less bang for the buck, less story per page. I talked to for like some publishers. I talked to First Second about it. They approached me about it, but they didn't want to do a book that was one strip per page. They wanted to do maybe three,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I get. I totally understand, but
I kind
I did my own thing.
I kind of feel like Nobrow would definitely match your production value to it, because like that's one thing I'm like a big production value nerd. That's one thing I really like about the first issue of Isola is like you guys actually have an excellent paper stock on the covers, which is awesome.
Hmm.
And like so that kind of thing makes a big difference. But I did want to ask about strips really quick. Like, did you grow up a big fan of like comic strips? Because like your rhythm in your storytelling sometimes, especially in Abominable Charles Christopher, because it is a strip book, has kind of the cadence in like the way that you deliver story and like kind of some of the patience that you get from some strips, like especially like Calvin and Hobbes, for example.
Yeah, I like comic strips were just part of my like worldview of comics, because I remember when I was really young, like in grade one and stuff, going to the school library, and I would take out a lot of Peanuts
Mm,
volumes and just bring them home. And I didn't understand them all because a lot of that stuff was over my head at the time. But I um, just really liked the look of it, and the feel of it. And then later, I found not even in newspapers. It was my grandparents had one of the Calvin and Hobbes collections, and I read that and just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I mean,
yeah,
it was just on a whole other level,
yeah,
and so that became a huge influence too. Not so much stylistically, but just in terms of the artistry of strip comics, just what you
hmm
could accomplish. Because I mean, so many of those comics were produced, with expedience in mind. Like there's just like a real pared down feeling to them stylistically. But Watterson's stuff, like it's just so lovingly rendered. I don't know how he was producing them at
so
the rate he
fast.
was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why he quit after 10 years. I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons. That's like a packed thing, and he's talked about it a bit. But at the same time, it's like I don't know. It's got to take a lot out of you.
Yeah. Well, he's also a huge touchstone for me, not just in terms of his artwork, but just his integrity
Oh
to
yeah,
do his thing and not market the hell out of it, and to end things when they're finished, and to keep his privacy. Like I frequently say out loud, like, what would Bill Watterson do? Like I like in all aspects of business or life. It's like him and Salinger. I feel like I have like my approach to almost everything artistic kind of comes from that. And
hmm
sometimes it's I butt heads with people because those decisions are not marketable decisions.
right.
and I just don't care. Like I think I always just feel like I have faith that quality will find an audience.
Hmm.
And yeah, it might happen after I'm dead. There's certainly good reasons to make certain marketing decisions, but I try to stick to those those sort of philosophies as much as possible.
I do think one thing that I look at in comics is like you talked about Frank Miller earlier. Like I think a lot of what Frank did in the 80s in particular, the reason why it was such a success and still so successful today is because he did, like, if you look at his stuff, it's so different than a lot of other comics that are being published then, especially for the characters he worked on.
Hmm.
And I think like the kind of fearlessness and the desire to do something different. Same with Bill Watterson. I think Bill Watterson, if he was still making Calvin and Hobbes today, we probably would have grown to hate it. But instead, like he did things on his terms, and I think that there's a lot of value to being a storyteller who approaches things on their own terms. I mean, there's risk there, of course, but at the same time, there's a lot of value there too.
Yeah. The other amazing thing about Frank is that he would just not only like he emerged on the scene doing things his own way and differently from other comics, but then he just kept changing. He
Right.
would just keep one-upping himself, and
Hmm.
and I have massive respect for that. It also goes against most people's good business sense, which is to establish a brand and stick to it. But Frank didn't give a shit. Like he would just do whatever he thought was going to be great, and it was.
Well, and he had like a manga influence long before most people in Western comics did. Like, I did want to ask about like manga and like animation in general for you. I mean, obviously, I've read your interviews recently. You've answered a million questions about Hayao Miyazaki, but like, I am kind of interested in like the impact of animation on you because your art does have a somewhat animated feel to it, especially with the way that Michelle Azar-Asakorn colors you. What kind of impact did that side of the storytelling world have on, not, I may not be just an artistic thing, but how you approach storytelling?
I think like I wasn't a huge follower of a lot of manga or anime, but I was except for one notable exception, which was that both Brendan and I were huge fans of Macross.
Mm,
Well, Robotech here is how we watched it in North America, but that, like, I don't know if it was that I used to watch that. I watched a lot of Voltron. I loved the style of all the animation that came from Japan that
yeah.
we got here. Like I just loved the beauty of it and the movement of it. Um, but Macross was like there's a complexity to it that that was so new to me as an adolescent, um, that just stuck with me. And it's just because it was full of giant robots and aliens and stuff,
Hmm.
sure, but at its core, it was this story about people with a lot of this like these emotional character arcs and triangles, uh, and not always clear motivations. I mean, it was a lot of there was a lot of nuance in it, a lot of people pondering, and I I found it incredibly affecting at the time. Like I
Yeah.
just loved that they could spend so long on people humming and hawing. Like part of it, granted, was just the nature of dubbing.
Right.
Like the way the beats of speech and stuff. But I really liked that. I liked the awkwardness that created.
Hmm.
Like as opposed to traditional scripting
Right.
where everything is very perfect and no one hums or haws or clears their throats or anything like that. I love that in these dubbed Robotech shows there was a stilted quality to the performances, and it just felt more human to me.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I don't know that this really informed that, but I have like a really low tolerance for insincerity in
Hmm.
storytelling. Whether it's character motivations or whether it's the way people speak. Like if it sounds um, if it sounds kind of unnatural or fake or expository to me, it just completely takes me out of the
Yeah.
moment. Which is why. when I'm working on stuff, I think I spend a long time focusing on what I think the characters would actually be doing, and what people actually do a lot of the time is process stuff.
Hmm.
You know, like things happen and you process it, and you usually don't know what to say. Or
Right.
if you do say something, it's probably not exactly what you were thinking in your head. It's filtered through social conventions or who knows what, and it's highly imperfect. And I think that just informs a lot of the way I handle like all my character work. You know, that's why I end up with all these like really long scenes of people, people staring at things or looking back and forth at things, or just reflecting. It's
Hmm.
not so much a it's not so much a manga influence, which I did develop later, but I think it's just how I
Think of stories.
yeah, it's just an honesty, I
Yeah.
think. That's how I feel about it. And if I don't give those moments to them, it just feels staged.
I feel like you probably hate romantic comedies.
I don't actually. I love them. It's weird. I mean, having said all of that, like like when something is crafted in a certain style or a certain voice, and it's intended to be kind of affected.
It's true to that, as long as it's true
Yeah,
to that.
yeah, like the Gilmore Girls is a really good example.
Yeah.
I love the Gilmore Girls. It's completely unrealistic in terms of
Cadence
dialogue,
of
right?
conversation
Yeah,
and how they talk.
but
Yeah.
but it's consistent with itself, and you just get into that world and those characters, and you just go with it. I actually really like romantic comedies.
I also do, but just the way you were saying it, I was like, man, like because like especially in the aughts, like there was like 500 Days of Summer and like all these different romantic comedies that have these like really everyone always has the perfect thing to say back to each other, but there isn't. I guess if they had a lot of ponderous moments where they were staring back at each other longingly in each other's eyes, it probably would not have the same amount of zip and entertainment to it. But
I actually consider, thinking of that, because I'm really I like romantic comedies, but I'm tired of traditional story structure,
sure.
especially when it comes to that formula. You can just see these sort of story beats and plot twists coming from a mile away. But I was just thinking as you were talking that, like, I consider the Royal Tenenbaums a romantic comedy,
Yeah.
and maybe one of my favorite ones. Like I love that relationship between Gwyneth Paltrow and Luke Wilson.
Yeah. A lot of Wes Anderson's movies actually really could be like I my favorite movie of all time is Rushmore, and like
Mm.
that's a love triangle movie that's just
Yeah, same.
really weird. It's also a coming of age movie, but it's a lot of different things. It reminds me of John Layman, the guy who wrote Chew, is like told me one time. Basically, it's like I asked him what genre he would call one of his books or something. He was just like, oh, it's just life. Like life doesn't really have a genre. It's just a little bit of everything. And I'm like, huh, I never really thought about it like that. But that's kind of Wes Anderson stuff. Um,
Yeah.
I have you ever read Pluto by Naoki Urasawa?
I've never finished a complete Urasawa run. I read a lot of 20th Century Boys.
Oh, I love
I
it.
think I read the first Pluto book. I've read some of Monster.
I'm reading. I was just saying I'm reading Pluto right now, and there's just the way that he uses kind of like silence and just kind of looks that shared between people. There's like a lot of space in between
Mhm.
dialogue in certain moments, and it makes sense because like the majority of the cast are like AI, they're robots, and
Mhm.
so it's really interesting how much it kind of amps up the tension without you really even thinking about it. Like it's
Yeah,
not it.
he's also just a master of conveying people's thoughts through their expressions, even when those expressions are not exaggerated, which they
Right.
rarely are. I mean, like it's often he draws all these faces that are beautiful caricatures, kind of exaggerated in their features, but not, they're not like mugging for the camera or anything. They're not like their expressions are actually quite subtle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm
The other one I just read was the first volume of Goodnight Pun Pun, which is also full of amazing, amazing silent moments and just coming of age stuff and awesome, um, slice of life things.
I have not read that. Manga is like I'm super deep into Urasawa, but like I really feel like I need to expand that side of my comic reading because there's just so I mean obviously there's so much out there, but it's such a diverse landscape of story types too, which I really appreciate. But
If
um
you want to, like, I'm also kind of like I'm not really immersed in manga either. But I find that a lot of stuff I end up liking, I find through Sarah Horrocks,
Yeah, yeah.
through her recommendations. I like her Twitter feed or Tumblr or whatever. She's always posting really great stuff. And in fact, it was her article about she did a this sort of amazing 2 or 3 part analysis of Liefeld's work
Mm.
from New Mutants and X Force, which completely, like, I was always a fan of Liefeld, but this really cemented a lot of what I believe made his work so amazing um, back at that time. You should read that article. I don't have a link to it, but
No, no, I'll
but
look it
if,
up. Yeah, she's
yeah,
mercurial blonde, right?
Mercurial Blonde. Yeah, I would recommend anyone to go and read that article because it's people like to dogpile on Liefeld for some reason, but like
It's
it's
so easy to do, and it's so lame. I just like it kills me. Like
yeah,
I've
he
heard
was
some.
a
Sorry.
huge influence on me. I loved his work, and I think yeah, go read the article because it says amazing things just about like the kind of awesome abstract stuff he was doing in the backgrounds and the
Mm-hmm.
use of color um, on those comics at the time. Like I think like honestly, I think modern color kind of ruined a lot of people's work.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting sometimes seeing like the differences between like you'll see those color tests where it's like somebody's recolored something from the past and like with like current styles. And
Yeah,
do
it's
you
always worse.
do you think it's more like a stylistic thing, or do you think it's just like it's obviously? I mean, it's obviously not a technology thing. It's like technology doesn't ruin the comics, but it does seem like there's a certain approach difference there.
I think like with most things, um, that stuff benefited from limitations,
Oh,
and
sure.
people now just have every possibility at their fingertips, and over myself included. I mean, I'm learning as I go
Mm-hmm.
to color things, and like really, you get Photoshop and you start doing every possible thing, and then learn to try to scale back and pick a couple of key colors, and just back before computer coloring, it was like Pantone coloring, and you had to keep in mind that you were coloring on this shitty newsprint.
Right. And what
So
that'll do to it.
yeah, what that'll do to the colors and also just for effect, just for sheer effect, you're better off abstracting your palettes and like doing like these weird hot pinks and bright blues and purple. I love when like foreground elements are just colored in these like weird purple colors and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are these crazy hot pink highlights on things. Like it just the stuff is so much more um, energetic. It just reads more like it's not realism, but thank God. Like it's like that's the last thing I want
Right.
in my comics. Having just said that I want characters to behave realistically.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between like them looking realistically versus like how they behave and everything. It's like it seems like as long as you have like unified standards to how you approach everything, you're happy with it. Even if it's bright pink or if it's like how the characters act, like that's just kind of what you're looking for. I do think it's interesting. Like on Isola's covers, like Isola 2, you have Queen Olwen on there, in tiger form, and
Mhm.
she's bright blue, and like that's I do think that like you kind of are you trying to do that a bit on Isla and like the way you and Michelle do everything color wise?
Yeah, totally. It's it's an evolving process, but the way I approached it was that like I've been trying for years to do just because I love the look of traditional animation. I've been trying to achieve that in comics, like on the comic page, and it started with some early Flash stuff, and then we did. I think we did it fairly successfully on that Teen Titans Year One book I worked on,
Mm-hmm.
and then on Gotham Academy, it sort of culminated. But Michelle was doing very painted backgrounds, completely painted backgrounds, and flat colors over top of them, which is what we wanted. But for Isola, I wanted to. I talked to her at length about it. I wanted to not not do like super rendered uh, painty stuff for the backgrounds, but rather try to keep everything as sort of pop and like hard edged as possible. Like just
Mm-hmm.
make it all more graphic. So she puts a ton of detail into it. So at a glance, it looks like it's painted, but if you examine it closely, it's harder edged brushes and a lot of like shapes and things as opposed to like big airbrushy sort of effects. And I also talked to her, and this is the part that's mostly evolving is that we both tend to color things very literally, like in like a natural white light.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I start everything, and um, and I wanted to be less literal with everything in Isola. Like I didn't, because it's a fantasy landscape, and I didn't want, like there are all these natural environments, but I'd like them to be slightly alien. So I keep pushing Michelle to, she'll color something and render it completely, and then I'll try to push her to just drop like a solid color overlay over the whole thing and just turn it all blue.
Mm-hmm.
Just so I'll say like, make this. This is beautiful. Now just make the whole thing blue,
Mm-hmm.
or make this whole thing red or green, and then we'll construct scene palettes based on that. Like all of the kind of dreamscapey stuff with the fox is all purple, and there's a very deliberate color palette that follows the scenes through. But in terms of the covers, I was trying to do something different, just with the presentation of it, and I wanted to do like the A covers, the main covers, which are just the large character shots with sort of a monochromatic color pass over it, are that was the only cover we were going to have. Actually, I didn't want to do multiple covers, but I wanted to do those because they were more graphic and they reminded me of bold manga volumes,
Mm.
where you just get like a giant character or like a big solid block of color on the front and then all the information on the back. I didn't want anything on the front. I wasn't even going to put a logo on the front. Uh,
Yeah.
um, and then I talked to Image and Eric Stevenson, and he had actually encouraged us to do something different with the presentation, which is why I sort of went 100% in that route. But he suggested putting the logo across the middle, and it looked really cool. So
Yeah.
I didn't fight that. I think he was totally right. But then when we went to Comics Row, where we were talking, we talked to some other retailers, which was an amazing experience. And I would recommend to anyone making comics to go and talk to all the retailers and see what they need and what, get feedback from them.
And what helps you sell the like it's a good
Yeah,
place to find out what would help them sell Isola.
yeah. Like we had the opportunity to present Isola to a room full of retailers, which is amazing. Um, and also to be able to talk to them after that and find out what their concerns would be or how they thought they could best sell it. And the feedback we got was that, um, hey, first of all, you guys, a lot of us stack our books a certain way, and no one's going to see your logo in the middle of this page. So you should have a logo up at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And also, you should like it's a bummer that your cover doesn't look like the inside of your book, because the inside of your book's beautiful, and this graphic thing is kind of cool looking, but it doesn't look anything like the comic that you're trying to sell.
Right.
And I kind of hummed and hawed about it. I was like, ugh, maybe they're right. And Brendan and I talked about it, and so we talked to Eric again. He said, well, why don't you just do two covers? Like Scotty does two covers. He does the fuck Fairyland cover, and he does the safe cover.
Yeah.
That's like, I hate Fairyland. So I thought, okay, well, all right. So I mocked up. I thought, oh, I'll just take a scene from the inside of the issue and make it into like a lush thing, and I'll redraw it. And Michelle colored it, and I thought, oh, this also looks really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So we weren't trying to double dip. I was just trying to make the retailers happy and make it easier for them to get this book into people's hands. So that's why we ended up with two very different looking covers, and we're just going to keep doing that
Well,
in
I
the
mean,
future.
the thing about it is too is like you're not doing it in a way that's like how some publishers have all these crazy order gates to get
Mhm.
different covers and everything. With yours, it's just open order, I think. So it just allows retailers to have different flavors for different types of readers. So for
Yeah, you
somebody,
just choose the one you want. So if you don't think you can sell the other one, or it's not to your taste, then
yeah,
yeah, I don't think Image does the gated order ones anymore. Like, I don't think you can do a variant cover of a monthly comic that requires a certain order.
Right.
So I remember part of the reason I didn't want to do multiple covers is because I remember Eric's keynote speech from Image Expo a few years ago,
Mm-hmm.
where he
The
was sort of,
2016 when you announced it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, when he was talking about the damage that having all these variant covers does to the industry, and like double shipping all that. And I was totally on board. I thought, yeah, he's right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't want to do like I want one cover that everyone can have. And then now we've got two covers, but yeah, at least they're not, you don't, there's no order minimum. You can just order the one you want.
Right. Well, really quick. So for listeners, we're talking about Isola, your new image book with Brendan Fletcher, colorist Michelle Asser-Asakorn, and letterer Aditya Bidikar. And I was kind of curious about like the development of the look of the book and the way you approach it. I know you've talked a lot about like you and Brendan's background for this and the development of it, and we even talked on this podcast before about all that stuff. But to continue on color a little bit, I was looking at I saw the paste piece on the book that was released that had the picture of you and Brendan when you were younger together. But there was also a watercolor test for the book. Was that just to kind of like figure out the palette, or was that like were you considered doing it as a watercolor book, or what was that?
That was well, when we first started developing it, it was Brendan sort of pitched me the initial high concept for Isola right before Gotham Academy happened, because we were going to start working on it, and then Becky got offered the DC thing. We created Gotham Academy, and so we put Isola on hold. But in my spare time, I did some tests, and I thought like it'd be great if we could do something, because Gotham Academy was really labor intensive, and I thought it'd be nice to make Isola like a faster book to do. Like, and so those pages that you saw they're a much looser style. Like the character designs are a bit different. They're a bit I don't even know how I'd characterize them. They're not the same style that I generally draw in there. Everything is looser pencil work, and I thought, well, maybe I can. I did a bunch of tests. I did some that were like wash tests and like grayscale tests, and I thought, well, maybe I can color this whole book myself, and just do simple watercolor stuff over top of this sort of pencil work. And so I did a couple of quickie sample pages, and that's what you saw up on the paste site. But then I don't know what happened. Like I think as soon as I decided to like that it was going to be too much work to color it myself, and I really wanted to work with Michelle again. I kind of defaulted back to like a style that I think everyone's kind of got their thing that they're comfortable with.
Yeah, yeah.
And for me, even though it's more time consuming to draw the way I'm drawing it, I don't know. There's a look about it, I guess, or a feel to it that I like. It's still kind of like animation, but not quite as explicitly. So yeah, it just evolved back into what it is now. But I did test a bunch of stuff beforehand.
Did you strictly like kind of work with Michelle to develop like the overall look that you were going for from a color standpoint? Or are you kind of involved on an issue by issue basis and kind of, determining like the palette from a scene to scene basis?
Well, what happened with this one was I did, before Michelle came on board officially, I had I'd drawn the first 4 or 5 pages of the first issue, and I colored, I think 3 or 4. I think I colored 4 of them myself. So what you see in the book now is partly my colors, but I was experimenting with that nighttime blue pass, right?
Right.
And I couldn't really I tried a few different things, and it always ended up not being what I wanted. And then when I talked to Michelle, I just sent her those few pages I'd done, and I said, "This is what I've got." And I kind of like the characters are all like, as opposed to Gotham Academy, where every character had 1 or 2 layers of shading or highlighting on them. The Isola characters are completely flat whenever possible. Like they're kind of just filled with one color with like not a lot of shading unless there's a reason for like a cast shadow or a reason for some effect. So I told Michelle, this is what I want. I want it to be really simple. I can't really make it work the way I want. See what you can do with it. And then she like added the blue stuff the way I wanted and made it and made it work. And then I think she took a lot of cues in the coloring from what I had done on those first couple pages in terms of the way I was rendering backgrounds. But then she just like amped up the detail to 11 and made it her own. And then the palette map across the whole issue was something she wanted to do, coming from an animation background and having enough time. She really wanted to just be able to map it out so we could, to give herself an idea of what we were going to do and to give us just an idea of the arc of the issue, like the storytelling of the issue in terms of color.
Mm-hmm.
Which is awesome. I love seeing that stuff, and I love that she does it. She does that for every issue, and she'll do like she basically take all my pages and make little JPEGs of them, do a super rough, small color pass of it just to show the movement of color throughout the issue.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and then we talk about it.
You can see it on the page. I mean, like the way it works out, it really, I mean, it doesn't look like anything else in the stands in a very good way. But one thing I want to ask about, like the backgrounds and the colors and everything, is I don't feel like I see this a lot very often, but in the backgrounds it seems like there's almost some like faded elements, like almost out of focus elements to that. What is that a Michelle thing? Is that a you thing? Where does that come from?
That's mostly Michelle. Like we have kind of like a rule of 3 in terms of like planes of depth.
Oh, okay.
In the
In
panel.
focus
So,
elements on the page.
Yeah, it's not necessarily always in focus or not, but there's always most of the detail, like the detailed drawing I do, is mid-ground work,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's distant background stuff and extreme foreground stuff, and a lot of the main flat coloring is happening in the mid-ground, but the foreground and backgrounds are where she plays with depth like that. Like the backgrounds often, if there's not, like sometimes it's just hazy forest or hazy rain background, and I'll just tell her like do some kind of hazy out of focus thing here,
Mm-hmm.
which she does. And the foreground stuff, I don't draw it blurred. Like a lot of the times the foreground stuff I'll do is like trees in the foreground or branches or leaves or whatever, and that's some of the only stuff I'll do in kind of stark silhouette, and she'll take that stuff and kind of add a depth of field blur
Mm-hmm.
to it, so it feels like it's out of focus, like a really small aperture or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or is that large aperture? I get confused. But yeah, that's all Michelle experimenting with stuff, and I think it looks awesome.
It does.
We don't talk about that stuff really at all. She just does it, and I think it looks great.
Yeah. There are a lot of interesting elements in there that like are kind of atypical from what I see in comics. Like I'll talk about sound effects later, but like I'll just talk about now. The sound effects that you do in it are very interesting because they're not like phonetic. They're just feel based. Like there's this one where Rooks like spikes her helmet on the ground, and it looks like 3 daggers pointing into it as it throws into it, and it's really interesting. Like why was that the direction you took that?
Just because I kind of hate sound effects. Like I don't hate sound effects. Actually, I love sound effects.
Some
comics,
of them are really goofy when they're phonetic.
Yeah, I hate phonetic English or Roman character sound effects. For the most part, sometimes they're done really well. Like Morrison and Quitely's Batman stuff was amazing, and like I can think of
Mignola.
Yeah, Mignola stuff is great. There are a lot that are great, but usually when I see them, or let me say this, when I try to do them, they look terrible.
Are you doing that?
Well, the way it worked for this was I definitely wanted to use some sound effects, but these, if anything is inspired by manga, it's this stuff, because I love the way katakana looks.
Mm.
Like Japanese phonetic sound effects look great, and it's mostly because, in my opinion, anyway, they're like katakana is just the shapes of the characters are blockier and less smooth and round and wishy-washy than English stuff.
I also think to a certain degree, it's like when it's English, it's like we have a tendency to try to like in our heads make it make sense, and that's not what you're trying to do with sound effects. You're trying to make it feel like something.
Exactly. So I didn't want to like appropriate katakana, but I also I wanted something that evoked it, like something with similar sort of shapes and jig-jags and things like that. And so I thought, well, like if you were reading manga and couldn't read katakana, which is the case for a lot of people, you still get the idea. You still know what that sound effect is basically telling you,
Mm-hmm.
based on its shape and its flavor. So I decided to just make up characters that were that would suggest a sound, like a scratchy sound or a booming sound or a thunking sound or like an arrow hitting something, and just make up characters that looked nice, that evoked a feeling of a sound rather than spelled a sound out. And also, I like that it just makes the whole. I like that it's incorporated into the page, into the artwork more,
Right.
and I also like that it gives the whole thing more of a fantastical bent. It doesn't. It just feels like it's like part of another world.
Yeah, I mean I've talked about this with other artists before, but it's like sometimes sound effects can be done in a way that feels like disconnected from the rest of it. It's like you want it all to feel organic and seamless, and like
Hmm.
I think that makes sense for what you're doing. But this kind of all ties into. I did want to ask about research because you guys were developing the book for a while. It has a lot of natural landscapes. I mean, one of the main characters is a human that's been turned into a tiger, and so naturally you're going to want your characters to feel right. How important is research in like for you as a creator, but also in the development of this book?
Um, I don't. I do.
A little.
Well, it depends. Like I do a little bit of visual research for design stuff, like for artwork and world building.
Mm-hmm.
Like I will have an idea of what I want something to kind of be, and then I'll do image searches or look through books and things, and just get ideas, like usually just culturally interesting ideas that I can spin off into something else. For different tribes and cultures and things in Isola, they're often based on real world components that I sort of embellish.
Mm-hmm.
The animals are the same. Like I'm accustomed to drawing a lot of animals, so a lot of these animals are either like straight up real world looking animals or real world animals with a weird tail or some horns or something like that, just enough to kind of take it into the realm of fantasy. So in terms of that, there's research in like I'm looking at a lot of tiger photos,
Right. A
so
lot, I'm sure.
a lot because tigers are kind of not easy to draw. For
Right.
I find them sort of difficult to draw for some reason.
Well,
Um,
wait, really quick. Like, it is the interesting thing about Olwen it's not just a tiger, but it's a tiger that was like a person that was a queen, and so it's
mhm.
like, is it difficult to thread that needle between like humanity, like that remnant humanity, but also the animal nature?
Yeah, it's difficult from like no matter which way you come at it, like whether it's from like trying to make the character act on the page, like visually, like you have to keep in mind that if this tiger is giving Rook a specific look, I mean that's a human look filtered through a tiger face,
Mm-hmm.
and if the tiger's stretching, I don't know, I think there's some stuff that happens sort of instinctively. Like I just felt like, yeah, I mean, like that tiger wakes up and stretches, and that's what a tiger looks like stretching. But also, like, I guess maybe the overall point is that people and animals are not all that different in their behaviors. But also, I wanted to say, like, it's you have to keep it in mind constantly from a story and writing perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and that also ties back into the research thing. Like the majority of my actual research is done when I'm like writing story or coming up with story ideas or coming up with names or characters backstories. Like a lot of stuff is based on um, older mythology or things that are derived from other languages or words. Like that's where the or often like in terms of geography, like how like the landscapes around mountain ranges or how a mar actually works. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like this sort of flooded volcano crater. Like there's a lot of research that goes into that stuff, but not so much into the drawing component of it.
Sure.
But yeah, but Olwen is we knew from the get-go, like as soon as we started talking about this story at all, that it lived or died on our ability to make this a relationship work between a woman and two women, one of whom can't speak because she's an animal.
Right.
Like it's just like a real tightrope to walk when you've got to keep the reader aware of what's happening, but only one person can speak, and like she might not always have all the information or even be right. So, yeah, it's difficult to do.
Yeah, I mean that kind of ties into like the silence like that we were talking about earlier. It is really interesting having a story where it's like the only conversation that can be had at times, especially with Olwen, is like through looks and through expressions and through posture and things like that. And it's a unique challenge to make that work. I mean, not necessarily for you as a creator because it speaks to how you like to approach things, but make it work for the readers, I guess. And I don't know if that's even a thing you can even consider. You're just trying to tell the best story you can.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just about limitations again. Like this is the card we've dealt, the hand we've dealt ourselves.
Yeah.
And like now we have to make it work. Like we believe in these characters and we understand what their relationship is, and so now it just has to work on the page. Now we just have to make it real for you. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's a lot of pushing and pulling in different ways. Like Brendan and I actually, our script is such as it is super loose, and a lot of what's happening on the page, I'm kind of like we'll write a breakdown together, and then Brendan will write a really rough draft of like kind of breaking the pages down even further, and then when I start drawing it, I'll edit that even further and add new stuff to it. But when all the art's done and we do a scripting pass, like it's based on some temp dialogue that we'd both written in various stages of this thing. But we'll do one dialogue pass that is just completely explicit. Like it's just like full of exposition. It's just basically like people talking way too much about all the things that are going on in the scene and all the motivations, just so we have everything there.
And so you can have it in your head when you're drawing it too.
Yeah, like we put together a PDF of this is after
this is after. Okay.
Yeah, this is like I've drawn it all, and now we do a dialogue pass that is like super verbose. Mm-hmm. It's just like everything that you could possibly want to say in this scene or between these characters is in this script. And I did a rough lettering pass of that and made a PDF so we could read it, and we'd both read it and go, "Ugh, this is awful. This is terrible." I gave it to my wife, and she's like, "This is like," she's apologetic in her critique, but she's like, "These characters are really annoying, and I don't know." And I was just like, "Yeah, I know. Most of this has to go." So, and then we just cut out like 85-90% of it to the point where we're left with only what is essential and like a few well-placed bits of exposition, so you just have an idea of what they're doing. But we're really just having a lot of faith that the readers will have faith in us, like that they'll, we're not just, we know where this is going, and things are going to open up and become more clear very soon. But we wanted to set the stage tonally for you. Like, this is what you're in for.
Yeah.
This is the pacing you're in for, and this is the kind of level of silence you're in for. And if you're into that, then great. I think you're really going to love what we've got going on.
Well, tying into that, one other challenge you guys have for people is you drop the first issue starts in the middle of the story. Like, Queen Olwen is already a tiger. Rook and her have already escaped to look for Isola. Like you do have the prologue that was in Motor Crush and also on Isola.ca, the website. Go there right now if you have not read that. Why did you guys decide to do that? Why was that the move?
Well, actually, when we talked to you last time, I think we talked about, like, we had a one-page prologue set up,
right,
that was going to go at the beginning of every issue,
mm-hmm.
like the same one. It was just going to say, there's a one page of like a few panels saying, "Hey, this is the queen, and this is the captain of her guard, and she's been turned into a tiger, and they're going to Isola."
Yeah.
basically that, right? And then you turn the page, and then we'd be into the story where we started it, just so you knew who these characters were and when they started.
Mm-hmm.
And I drew that page, and it was there for a long time, and we both kept saying, this is not quite right.
Too
Like, it needs
explicit.
something. Yeah, like it needs, or it needs, like, it just feels tonally wrong. Like,
Right.
it doesn't feel, when you open this book, it feels like you should open the cover and be immediately in this world. And we couldn't figure, like, we spent a lot of time on the phone for days, trying to design different ways to do this prologue in a way that felt holistic and just natural. And eventually I just said, like, why don't we just not do it?
Mm-hmm.
I know, and it was scary. It's super scary.
Right.
Because I thought, like, God, like, what do people have? Like, there's no hook. Like, they're going to go into this thing knowing nothing. And then we thought, well, it's going to be, by issue 3, all this stuff will be crystal clear.
Mm-hmm.
And it is not, conventional wisdom to release a first issue that doesn't have a very traditional hook.
Right.
But I just kept thinking, this is going to be collected into a book. And when it's a book, I hate to say it, like, I hate to put it this, like, I don't want to disregard monthly comics, but the fact is, it's going to live most of its life as this book.
Mm-hmm.
And if this were a novel, no one would care that they didn't have all the information in the first chapter. It's going to be a much nicer read as if it unfolds as you go along. And I just thought, like, let's just, like, we've come this far. Let's just double down on what we like. And if people get it, then great. And if not, we're going to have to explain a lot of stuff. But as far as starting it where we did, like, we have, like, all the backstory of how Olwen and Rook left like, how she was turned into a tiger and how they left the city was all, written down and in our heads. But like I don't want to see that. Like, do you, like eventually I want to see that transformation. Like, I want to know what happened, but I certainly don't want to see them escaping the city, and I really, really certainly don't want to draw it. So,
well, I mean, that's not the point of the story. The point of the story is their relationship and the journey, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it was really, like, one of the first images I drew ever was that image of Rook sitting outside the tent in the rain with the tiger in a tent
with the hind end, like, poking out.
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's the image we used when the book was first announced at Image Expo, and we just kept coming back to it. We thought, like, well, this is what the whole book is about.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just start with this image.
Right.
I mean, I can't say any better than this image, what this book is about. So why don't we just open on this and go from there?
I do think that there's something to be said about, because, like, readers kind of have, like, an expectation when it comes to first issues. Like, there's a formula there, and it's like you have to, like, spell it out, otherwise people won't come back. But I think that there's something to be said about challenging readers and making them, like, you want to almost sometimes, like, I could almost say the hook for Isola is that there, I know this is weird sounding, but there is no hook. It's like you have to figure things out. It's challenging you to come along with us in that journey. And I think, like, if you had just spelled everything out, it would have lost some of the specialness to it.
Yeah, it's also because typical fantasy stories are so front loaded with lore.
Yeah,
that it just exhausts you. And also, personally, and I think this is not just personal, but true for probably a lot of people. Like I've just got hook fatigue.
Right.
Like there's nothing special about starting your story with an exciting action scene or ending it with, like, a crazy plot twist anymore. Like, you just go into this thing thinking, you read it and you just think, oh, I guess that's a plot twist.
Right.
And it's just another plot thing. I don't care about plot.
When you start expecting it too, and it's like, if you're expecting it, then it's not really unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that you guys actually finished the first issue finishes with 2 pages from issue 2, so it's like it's like a teaser for what's coming next in a much larger way, and it's I don't know, it works really well. But I did want to ask, like, are you in? This is mostly because of the map. Are you and Brennan big fantasy nerds?
No,
No.
neither of us really. I mean, we both like Tolkien as much as the next guy, and like,
Right.
we liked ElfQuest a lot. Like I did like. I wasn't a fantasy nerd, but I did like when I was reading The Hobbit
Mm-hmm.
and reading Lord of the Rings to refer to that map all the time. I think
Yeah.
that's an awesome thing. Um, so, but I wouldn't characterize either of us as fantasy nerds by any stretch.
Yeah, I was gonna say that the map, like, I don't know what it is about maps in stories, but it's like as soon as I see a map, I'm like, okay, now we're cooking. I like this. Did you design that?
I did, yeah, I did the whole map mostly because I wanted that a map behind the characters on the covers,
Mm,
but also I put that map in the back for that reason, like because partly because I loved being able to refer to the map
right.
when I was reading The Hobbit, but also because while I am not a fantasy nerd, I know like Brendan's wife Laura, for example, is super into like when she's playing video games or reading books or fantasy things, like she's super into lore.
Yeah.
Like she's one of those people who will go and collect all of the like lore pages scattered around like a video game world and that
Mm-hmm.
kind of stuff, like diary page and stuff like that. And and I know there are people who like that stuff, who love having these like hints as to the expanse of the worlds that the fantasy worlds are reading about. So I put that map in the back, partly a design element and partly because I thought it would make her happy.
And we're us fantasy nerds are very easy to tempt. I mean, it's just like you put a map in there, we're like, yes, let's do
Yeah.
this. I
I
don't
mean, I
know.
will tell. I mean, it is like I know pretty much what their route is across that map. So
Mm-hmm.
like I think you'll be able to follow along.
Yeah.
That should make you happy.
So did you do all the design on the book?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. It looks great. I mean, I love like it's like I was saying earlier with the sound effects. It's important to have kind of a holistic visual feel, and especially when it's all coming from you, it just all feels very consistent, which is great. But yeah, I mean that's I think that's all I have for Isola. I wanted to finish with 5 questions about Charles Christopher, if that's cool with you.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Okay, so as I've established earlier, I'm a big fan of your webcomic, The Abominable Charles Christopher. If you have not read it, if you've not read any of it, you should go on there, go on to the website. Is it abominable.cc?
Yeah. It's CC. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't even
Uh,
know what CC what that's from.
well, it
Can't-
worked out perfectly for you.
I think it's the Cocos Islands or something like that.
It's funny how many different domain names there are. Like on Curse Words is an image comic, and like their email for their letters and everything is like wizard@horse.com or wizard.horse or something like that, because horse is actually a domain name now. I don't know why. Anyways, but so I want to close with 5 questions about that. I'm kind of curious about that book because of the strips and because of how many different asides you take in it. Like, how improvisational is your process on that book? Like,
It's completely improvisational. It started as um, I don't know if we've ever talked about it, but it started as I had no intention of making a story out of it. It
oh,
started as it was just going to be a series of little strips, like non sequitur strips surrounding this main silent Sasquatch character. It was actually inspired by the old Walter Lantz Woody Woodpecker cartoons,
oh,
in which like I just remember them being kind of like very slapstick and very kind of situational, and just kind of Woody dealing with stuff or annoying people in these in the woods.
mm-hmm.
It's been a long time, but that's kind of what it was intended to be. But as Charles Christopher, the character, moved around a lot, a narrative started to form, and a lot of the asides are just things that I wanted to explore, like things that amused me on the day,
Right.
or sometimes just deliberate beats to get away from a narrative. Because like I kept sort of railroading myself into this story, and then realized that I didn't want to be doing that, and I would go back to like just a one-off gag kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then like 2/3 of the way through, it became very heavily narrative, and not just in terms of Charles Christopher's story, but like all the characters. I guess when you keep going back to these supporting characters, they develop their own stories,
Mm-hmm.
and so you just that stuff I actually enjoy more. is following up on the exploits of all these other characters. The main like kind of A storyline is the difficult one. It's partly, if I'm honest, like the reason that I haven't picked it up again in a while. Like it's just a scary thing to contend with to wrap that thing up. I mean, I know basically how it ends, but it gets very epic. It becomes really big and cumbersome for me to manage in my head. Like it just becomes not the thing that I started, in that it's like a lot more crafted writing and plotting. So I have every intention of finishing it. But yeah, it was, in answer to your question. Yeah, it was almost all improv. Like on the day, I was doing one strip a week on Wednesdays, and I would just make up that strip that morning and draw whatever was amusing at the time. So, and then it just took on this larger life.
That's awesome. I mean, I do think it's interesting how you started as this thing that was just kind of you having fun and like you telling us, like, not even telling a story, you just like digging into this random idea, and it became this large thing that it almost went against what you originally intended it to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was done entirely for the purpose of having fun, and then like when it comes time to like start writing complicated stuff, it's no longer as much fun. But
Right.
the cool thing about it is that like it's probably the only comic I've ever started or done just to have fun with.
Yeah.
And as a result, it's the most um, I guess personal one. Like it's just the most, like my character is in there like all through. It just like seeps into those comics. So it's the most me, I guess, is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say. It's very, very purely me, for better or for worse. And and I just think that it's the innocence of the way I approached it is the reason it became that way. Like it just couldn't help but be very. It was never intended to make any money or be anything. It was just looks like an amusing thing and an exploration of whatever I was whenever I was feeling on the given day.
Yeah. It is kind of funny that like it kind of gave you practice. I mean, not obviously this was not really a practice run type thing, but it's like having a character who's silent that is also like a beast, a creature. It was like gave you a lot of practice for doing Olwen, like in a very real way.
Oh
But
yeah, for sure. Like making any of those animals expressive or emote in any way was sort of training for this.
so another question is there like it seemed like a lot of the characters that you kept coming back to, like it almost you probably didn't have the intent for them to keep recurring. Like a good example is like Sissy Skunk. Like there were like the salesman of Sissy Skunk, which I think is hilarious. But like I highly doubt you planned on that being like this returning gag that keeps coming up over and over. But is there a specific character you particularly enjoy returning to the most? And if so, was it the drunk bird whose wife was always mad at him?
um, Definitely one of them. That bird, because that bird. I mean, as with any person making anything, like all these characters are just explorations of my own, characteristics or personality.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the bird is like it's just boring a lot of dad stuff because I was that bird was created before I was a dad, but something about the relationship between fathers and sons really interested me, and then much more so when I became a father.
Mm-hmm.
So uh, there's a bleakness to it sometimes. Like there's like a sort of depressing element to it,
Right.
where this bird was actually, for what it's worth, actually not really. I think he was drunk once, like he's at a party. So I don't think like he gets a bad rap, but I don't really think of him
Yeah,
as
that's
a
true.
drunk, even though that's kind of his thing. He's henpecked and harried for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some of it's kind of depressing. I mean, like just this guy trying to come to terms with fatherhood and like how to balance his family life with some semblance of like I guess a social life,
Mm-hmm.
or or some selfishness maybe. I don't know. So yeah, he's a fun one to come back to. I also really like um, I also really like that porcupine
Yes.
because he's because it speaks to sort of the nerd in me, like the because I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons and reading basically everything that was nerdy at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the arc, I really like the arc of that porcupine character because I haven't gotten into it deeply, but basically he started off as this super role playing nerd and then ends up as we go on, as he gets a little older, ends up creating his own game. He creates his own role playing game and
Mm-hmm.
then acquires some fans because of the thing he's created, and then becomes disgusted by the fans of the thing he's created, and ends up, wanting nothing to do with that thing anymore. And that's the arc that I love in it. Like I think I have lots to say about
Yeah.
about that.
That's
Like
awesome.
that's what I enjoy exploring about that character.
Yeah, I this is not one of my planned questions, but for somebody like Moonbear, was Moonbear always meant to have like kind of a story thread through the whole thing, or was that something that kind of just evolved as well?
Moonbear, the story of Vivol and Moonbear was its own story before I started Charles Christopher even. Like I thought, like I had an idea for a story about two circus bears
Mm-hmm.
um, who escaped the circus, and I just worked that into Charles Christopher because there were bears in it. So um, and it's yeah, I don't know. It's I guess that story is mostly there are repercussions of it that
Mm-hmm.
I'll get to later, but it's a really bittersweet thing, and I'm really happy with the way it played out. It's basically what I wanted out of that Circus Bear story originally, but hopefully it has a place in the larger Charles Christopher tapestry.
I love that you just basically get to explore all the different like types of stories and like story threads that you want to all in this like one little kind of test kitchen of sorts. It's like the place where you get to explore the other side
Hmm.
that you don't necessarily get to approach all the time.
Well, one of those sides is actually horror, like because like there's a strong like, and that's where I am now, and it's why maybe I've stalled a little bit because where I've left the story with like the Gilgamesh and Humbaba subplot is uh is very much kind of like mythological horror,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if you've noticed, but like a lot of like that stuff plays into a lot of everything I do. Like Gotham Academy was set for all intents and purposes a YA horror book. Like
Right.
it was as creepy as we could make it,
While still
while
being a DC
still
book.
being for a certain audience. Yeah, and Isola certainly has an element of horror to it that'll be more evident in upcoming issues. And I guess it found its way into Charles Christopher too. There's something about I'm not even a big horror guy. Like I don't watch a lot of horror movies, but there's something about that. Um, there's elements of that I really like, and I think it's why I like Hellboy a lot too, because he touches on that stuff in a really um, I don't know, kind of like an otherworldly, like well, almost a spiritual way. Like in Isola, it's almost like a kind of like a Shinto
Mm-hmm.
traditional way. Like it's just this stuff that's like it's horrific from a certain point of view, but it's just part of the world. It's just the way like the animals feasting on entrails of things. It's just like nothing you would see in a nature documentary, but it's kind of horrifying at the
Right.
same time.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting because it's like I feel like in a lot of ways it's explicit in some ways, but it feels more environmental, like kind of atmospheric horror in some ways. Like I don't feel like overdone by it, but it's like I feel it. You know what I'm saying? I really poorly explained that, but
Yeah.
um,
No, I'm glad though. That's good.
one question. So just two more questions. One of the things I think that is amazing about Abominable Charles Christopher is that you simultaneously feel very respectful and reflective of like the realities of nature and how it really works, but it's also super absurd. Like one of my favorite parts. I've tout this to basically anybody who will listen. I don't know why I'm obsessed with the comic where the migrating geese are talking about how like when they're at home they always want to be traveling, and when they're traveling they always want to be at home. It's like something I feel very strongly personally. But like how
Yeah.
I know given the improvisational nature, it's not really something you have to do on a regular. But how important and difficult was it to like properly thread that needle where you are doing things that are reflective of you, but also reflective of this story, while also being, respectful of the nature of the book? Or is that even a thing?
Oh boy. Well, I think a lot of it just sort of happens. Like things just fall into place. Like I recall that strip very well, and it's because to me it's extremely honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember doing it. I remember doing it because I had just been traveling,
Right.
and I probably thought like, my thought process was like, oh, I kind of want to write this little thing about travel, like sort of love. And what's an animal I can use to do that? Oh, how about like something migrating?
Mm-hmm.
So I went with geese, and then yeah, the thing just juxtaposes well. But I don't know. Like I guess there's like the broad. Like I'm not sure how broad you mean the question to be in terms of like respecting the nature of it, because I think the entire comic is about the fact that I don't really distinguish between human and animal nature.
Sure.
You
right.
know, like I think one is as deserving of respect as the next,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a message to that comic. That's what it is. But like, that's on a broad scale. But like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I think it just happens because that's where my head is at any given time.
Yeah.
I also like that strip a lot because um, because it touches on like bowel dysfunction due to frequent travel.
Yeah, that is one thing I really love. Is like it seems that's the fun thing about strips is like you can always kind of sneak something like that in there too. It's like, oh, this is thoughtful, and there's also a joke there. So the last question I want to ask is, I feel like we're outside the statute of limitations for spoilers, but I wasn't reading the strip yet when Townsend was killed, and Townsend was an extremely likable character. How, on a scale of 1 to 10, how upset were your readers with you when that happened?
Oh, I mean, I don't want to say 10 because it seems like, you don't want to give anything a perfect score. So I'll say 9. I think people understood it and were affected by it, but were pretty upset.
Yeah.
And it's a weird thing, but I was upset by it. I mean, when I drew those scenes, it was very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a funny thing because if you look at like when maybe you can answer. You read it later on after it had happened, but when I was doing that comic from week to week, it felt like Townsend had been around for a long time.
Yeah, but it wasn't that long, really.
I was doing one strip a week. No, he wasn't in the comic for very long.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found it really odd that people would be as affected, or that I would be as affected by the death of that character after such a short, such little screen time,
mm-hmm.
so to speak, as he had. But it's like the thing I get asked about or complained at for most often at conventions, or like asking if he's coming back, because I suppose in the context of that world he could maybe. But
I do like the idea that he's
but
like
I felt
an X-Men
like
character that could rise again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, they're like ghosts of bears and stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's
it
true.
could be anything. But I like the way that story wrapped up with his brothers and stuff. Like I was very satisfied with it, and I felt like it was a good ending for that that mini plot. I never thought of him as a plot device. Like I didn't like I needed Charles Christopher to move on, but like there's no reason he couldn't have stayed around longer. It was just for some reason, like I was on a long motorcycle trip somewhere, and I just was spending a lot of time thinking about the story, and that idea occurred to me, and
it felt right.
I just liked the way it felt. Yeah, It just felt right, and I went with.
Yeah, no, I mean
Yeah.
it worked out perfectly. I mean, actually, the strip of all of the brothers on top of Charles, or kind of hanging out with Charles Christopher when they're going down the river on the log. I have
Mm.
two prints from that. I have that one, and I also have the one of Townsend and Charles Christopher, like when they're like taking a break and they're like napping. Like those two strips, I
Mhm.
have those up on my walls in my office and my home office, and my work office, and I need to get the migraine geese one. But anyways, that I don't know. Like it is funny how those like little like those things you don't think are going to be a huge deal end up being a massive deal because I don't know. I think Townsend just was so personable, and we just had so much affection for him in the same way that Charles Christopher himself did that it was hard
Mhm.
not to have a lot of love for him. And so when he went, we were like, this is heartbreaking, and it was. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I actually got kind of goosebumpy right now thinking about it. I mean, I really love that his brothers riding back with Charles, and the thought that their mom is waiting for them. I mean, I
yeah,
just find that really
yeah.
the
Were you a
emotion really
dad then?
powerful. Uh, no, I don't think so. No,
Oh, okay,
it
yeah.
was not.
I wonder if that's
Yeah.
changed the way that you look at that now. But Carl, that is actually all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, my pleasure, man. I love your podcast. I'm happy to come by anytime.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with artist Karl Kerschl. You can find him on Twitter at Karl Kerschl, on his website at karlkerschl.com, and his work in Isola at Image Comics and the Abominable Charles Christopher at abominable.cc. If you're a fan of the show, there's some big news. Off Panel now has a Patreon. If you like the show and want to support it, consider backing on Patreon at patreon.com/offpanel. There are fun rewards and insider information you get if you do. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including David, Jason Massey, Mike Gillis, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Maria Schweitzer, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Dan Guarino, Dan Lee, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Evan Blazer, Brian McRae, Ira James Udaskin, Benjamin Birdie, Henning Allers, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bruno Batista, Abraham Reisman, Adrian Diaz, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, Darren Neely, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Michael Perlman, Phil Nall, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Shipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Maxwell Schmidt, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Lou Iovino, Christopher Carter, Nicholas Kesslake, Greg Rucka, Ryan Mail, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTCHD. Follow it on Twitter at @sketchcomic, or follow me at @slicefriedgold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track Outro from the album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.